other options that are on the market is practically 99% of all available handguns. They are all semi-automatic. They fire one shot for one pull of the trigger. Now, according to Bruce A. Kobayashi and Joseph E. Olson in the Stanford Law and Policy Review, as they say, prior to 1989, the term assault weapon did not exist in the lexicon of firearms. Assault weapon is a political term developed by anti-gun advocates to convince people that some guns are too scary, or too effective, ergonomic, or something for citizens to own. The technical term assault rifle includes full auto military firearms such as the M4A1 carbine. The AR-15, yet again, is not an assault rifle. It's not full auto. It's semi-automatic, like most other guns on the market today. And to further add that since America's founding, civilian sporting rifles have evolved along with military firearms. The modern sporting rifle simply follows that pattern. There are numerous different other firearms on the market developed by civilians that fire semi-automatic and in the same cartridge. And we will discuss that here in a little bit, actually. So myth number 3, it's all about appearances. This has a lot of unnecessary information. Basically, all I want to focus on are the terminologies right there highlighted. And this came right off of California's, their codes annotated and the laws they have in power, because they are a very, very strict state when it comes to the AR-15. So the points of which I want to make out here are a semi-automatic center fire rifle that has a capacity to accept a detachable magazine and at least one of the following features. The AR-15 follows both of those. A pistol grip that protrudes conspicuously beneath the action of the weapon, a thumb hole stock, a folding or telescoping stock, a grenade or flare launcher, a flash suppressor, or a forward pistol grip. That is an AR-15. Walk around here. As you can tell, the stock right there on the end is what is called telescoping. It allows you to adjust what is called the length of pull. It can make the gun shorter or it can make it longer. There's that conspicuous pistol grip right off the bottom that's just kind of sitting there menacingly. Semi-automatic, detachable banana magazine. It does not have a forward pistol grip, but this one can be attached. And right at the front there is what is referred to as a bird cage flash hider. It suppresses the flash or the report of the rifle. This gun is also a semi-automatic and it accepts a detachable magazine. However, it does not have a folding or telescoping stock. It does not have a flash suppressor. It does not have that conspicuous pistol grip sticking out of the bottom. Except here's what's ironic about this firearm. That is an AR-15. It just has different furniture on it. It functions the exact same as the gun above it. This is a civilian firearm that was developed about 40 years ago called the Ruger Mini 14. The only thing that this thing really has in common with the AR-15 is the fact that it is semi-automatic and accepts a detachable magazine. However, it does not have the flash suppressor on the front. It does not have a capability of accepting a forward pistol grip. It does not have that conspicuous pistol grip in the rear, and that stock is fixed. This gun is legal in just about all 50 states that even have serious assault weapon restrictions. But with the change of a couple of screws and a little bit of furniture, that gun is suddenly illegal. That is the exact same action, exact same fire rate, exact same magazine capacity. The only difference is now it has a pistol grip, a folding stock, and can accept a forward pistol grip, and it has a flash suppressor. That's the exact same firearm. Legal, illegal. And what's even more ironic is the given fact that this gun has a barrel length that is pretty much identical to the AR-15. It fires the exact same caliber in .223, and the ballistics are almost identical. Except everybody talks about that gun. Nobody talks about this whatsoever. This is what is referred to as the SKS. It is a 10-round fixed magazine, semi-automatic firearm that fires the same caliber, the 7.62 by 39, as the AK-47. Yet again, it is a very similar barrel length, very similar fire rate, very similar ballistics. It's almost identical in every way. But with the removal of a little bit of furniture, that gun's suddenly illegal in the state of California. Yet again, telescoping stock. The two pistol grips, this one does not have a flash hider, but it also accepts a banana magazine. That's a 30-round mag. The Mossberg 500 in its standard hunting configuration, wood stock, long barrel, all that jazz. With a little bit of removal and swapping out of parts, that gun now has a telescoping stock, pistol grip, shorter barrel. I think you get the idea. This is the Glock, America's service pistol. With a little swapping out of parts, that's now suddenly a short-barreled rifle. It's that easy. Everything in that law is all about appearances. As I showed previously, I can remove all of that, and now I've got a gun that is suddenly legal. And yet at its core functions, it is still identical. Same fire rate, same caliber, accepts the same mags, same ballistics, all of that. I don't need to have all this furniture on here for that firearm to be lethal. Now, myth number 4, the AR-15 is not suitable for hunting. This is actually a 1960s ad of Colt talking about how their new superb hunting partner, the Colt's new AR-15. It is often said by many different politicians and anti-gunners and anti-hunters that the AR-15 is not suitable for hunting and that it is too powerful. Why do you need 30 rounds or 50 or 100? You'll Swiss cheese the deer. Do you expect the deer to shoot back? The weapon's too heavy. If you need more than one shot, you suck. And to further emphasize this point, this comes from our current president now, who was the vice president then. If you are a hunter and you need an AR-15, you shouldn't be out there hunting. If you need 100 rounds in your clip, also known as a magazine, you're a danger to yourself. If you're out there hunting, I'm not joking. By the same man in 2013, if you need more than 10 rounds to hunt, and some argue they hunt with that many rounds, you shouldn't be hunting. If you can't get a deer in 3 shots, you shouldn't be hunting. You are an embarrassment. These next two are one of my favorites. AR-15s are as heavy as 10 moving boxes and fire 50 caliber bullets. I don't know why, but we as Americans will use literally anything but the metric system to measure and weigh objects. That's just funny. Now, the last one. We have federal regulations and state laws that prohibit hunting ducks with more than 3 rounds, and yet it is legal to hunt humans with 15 round, 30 round, and even 150 round magazines. Dianne Feinstein. I don't know about anybody else, but the last time I checked, it was not illegal, or that it was not legal to hunt humans. That's kind of called homicide or murder. Last time I checked, that was kind of illegal. Further emphasize my point, that is me hunting with an AR platform, which has all of those scary additions on it. It has a telescoping stock. I've got a forward grip. My hand's around the rear grip. It's actually got a compensator on the front, but works just as good as a flash hider. And in that, I have a 10-round magazine. Now, as a hunter and a hunter's education instructor, I do agree that you do not need 30 rounds to go out and shoot a deer. It's kind of ridiculous. I do agree. If you need that many rounds, you do kind of suck. However, I do have a 10-round mag in that thing. I had 4 bullets in it. I don't know why it's such a strange concept to some people that you can put less rounds in a bigger mag. And I was actually out with a gentleman this last weekend who had an AR-15 or an AR as well, not an AR-15. And he only had a 20-round magazine. He put 3 bullets in it. So I'm going to focus mainly here on the common caliber that is fired out of the AR-15, which is the .223 caliber bullet. It comes in a 55 and 62 grains. In the military or the NATO standard, it is a 5.56 millimeter bullet in a 45 millimeter casing. So that's that little bugger right there. We're going to compare this to the America's most common hunting caliber, that of the 30-06, which comes in common bullet weights of 150 grain, 165, and 180. Comparative to the .223, that is a 7.62 millimeter bullet out of a 63 millimeter casing. The 30-06 is about a third the size, 3 times the weight, and all around a bigger bullet. And what's even crazier is the given fact that the 30-06, which was developed by the military, is what was serviced in the United States infantry rifles of the 1903, the model 1917, the venerable M1 Garand, and the Remington 700. We shot people with that big behemoth for over 80 years. And people tell us that that little bugger is too much. Now, there's a whole lot of math and unnecessary nonsense revolving around trying to figure out ballistics and everything. I prefer to just kind of jump straight to it. So the .223 caliber rifle, or .223 caliber cartridge, my bad, is moving at a velocity of 3,150 feet a second. It's a small little thing that moves really quickly. However, it is only transferring 1,250 pounds of energy. Sounds like a lot. However, comparing that to the 30-06, which even though it is moving about 300 feet slower at 2,820 feet a second, it puts out about 2.5 times more foot-pounds of energy. It hits harder. Now, to further emphasize my point, Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Iowa, Massachusetts, Virginia, Ohio, New Jersey, Washington, West Virginia, all require larger bullets to be used to hunt game. That came off of Stag Arms. You need a bigger bullet than that little pathetic thing of the .223. And it's not because it's considered too powerful, but because it is considered not powerful enough. And even I, as a hunter's education instructor, do not recommend to my students and other fellow hunters that if you intend to take game bigger than anything than a coyote or prairie dogs, smaller animals like that, you need a bigger bullet. However, though, the AR-15 or the AR platform, like many other variations of firearms, has been widely adapted to accept many different calibers acceptable for harvesting game. That photo I showed, that gun is chambered in .308. That's a very acceptable caliber for harvesting both deer and elk. There are also other patterns of the AR that are chambered in 30-06. Now, granted, it'll put you down about $5,000, but people have created it. And it was not created by the military. It was created in a civilian market. There are also AR patterns of firearms that fire little 22 caliber bullets. Pathetic little thing. You're not going to really use that for any sort of defense, but it's a great fun gun at the range. It's also good for competitions. And they are also chambered in handguns, such as the 9mm. The AR platform is a reliable, accurate, modular, acceptable, rugged, dependable platform for many, many uses, even outside of the military. It is good for hunting, self-defense, and competition. It runs, and it runs well. Now, this is probably going to be my most controversial topic today, because as we always hear on social media, in the news, everywhere, number of X people killed, shooter had an AR-15. There's an AR-15, AR-15, AR-15. How many more people have to die before we sit down and we talk about this topic? Well, that is what I'm here for. Myth number 5, AR-15s are widely used in crime. Every year, there are approximately 36,000 firearm-related deaths in the United States of America. But this breaks down into really two major categories with two following categories that I'm not going to focus on those two. The Gun Violence Archive reported that there were 39,551 firearm-related deaths in 2019, the most readily available statistics that I had or that I can find. Of that, approximately 14,000 are firearm-related homicides. The rest are suicides at about 75%. The FBI reported in 2019 that there were 13,927 homicides, and the CDC reported 23,941 suicides. However, for this talk, I'm focusing solely on the homicides because that is where this conversation lies. These statistics are broken up into four main groups by the FBI: handguns, shotguns, rifles, and other. And for the life of me, I still can't figure out what the heck other stands for. So my question to everybody here is, how many are killed by rifles? You've got between 0 and just shy of 14,000. Throw out a number. 10? Anybody else? 3,000? 3,000, okay. 200? Okay. 1,000? One guy was pretty close. Rifles as a whole make up approximately 300. I put deaths, I meant to put homicides a year. That's roughly 300 out of 14,000 related homicides. That equals approximately 2% of firearm related homicides. 2%. If you took that out of any sort of chart or statistic, that would not have that much of a visual change. And AR pattern rifles make up less than that. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find anybody really that could get it down. I read a report by, I don't remember what university, a couple of years ago. They estimated it to be about 25. I also saw a video of a guy that referred to it as about 125 from a source that wasn't listed, unfortunately. So I really wish I could narrow it down, but I can't. All I can really say is that it is less than 300 because of how many different rifles are on the market and that are used. So the FBI reported that there were 364 homicides involving rifles in 2019. That's a slight uptick than it has been in about the last decade, but it's staying kind of right around where it needs to be. In comparison, to bring it a little bit more closely, there were 209 total firearm deaths in the state of Montana, which is ironic given the fact that we are considered #1 in firearms related ownership. And yet people always say more guns means more crime, more death. We're not really showing it, despite the fact we also have some of the loosest gun laws in the union. Out of that 209 total firearm deaths in Montana, 27 were firearm related homicides. We had 1 involving a rifle. 1 in a state with the loosest gun laws and the most guns. In comparison to shotgun deaths, there were 200 in 2019. There were 397 blunt objects, clubs, hammers, baseball bats, anything that you could be used to bludgeon something. Yeah, more people die to blunt objects than they do to rifles. There were 597 personal weapons. That's hands, fists, and feet. Almost twice as many people are literally beaten to death by unarmed assailants than they are shot with a rifle. So next time someone says that they were unarmed, doesn't mean they're not deadly. There were 1,476 knives or cutting instrument homicides. That's almost 3 times as much comparative to rifles. Everyone in here has a 3 times higher likelihood of being stabbed to death than being shot and killed with a rifle. There were 3,515 fire-related instances. you have almost 10 times the higher likelihood of dying in a fire. Now, here's the more controversial one, and the conversation that nobody really has or has had in recent years. There are 6,368 handgun homicides. Handguns make up over 90% of all firearm-related homicides, mainly given the fact that it is small, it's compact, it's easy to hide. Rifles are big, they're bulky, you can't really hide them very well. There were 37,595 motor vehicle traffic deaths. I'm pretty sure everyone in here and everyone online has been in or driven a vehicle in their life and will continue to do so. You have, I don't even know what that number breaks down to. You have a massive 30 times, I think, higher likelihood of dying in a motor vehicle traffic incident than you do of being shot and killed with a rifle. But comparative to Montana, that number is, well, 37,594. There are 70,630 overdose deaths to illicit drugs. Now, I don't know why we can't rope that in. I think we should just make drugs illegal. Wait, that's right, we did. It's almost like it doesn't work. And there were 173,040 accidents or unintentional injuries. Montana, I don't have the statistic, but I know Montana is within the top 5 for work-related injuries and death. It is very dangerous. And there's no real set number, but the National Library of Medicine estimated that there were about 251,000 medical malpractice deaths in the United States of America. They also estimated that number to be significantly higher, given the fact that doctors can very easily alter the numbers or lie or just not report it. Yeah, you actually have a higher likelihood of dying under the care of a doctor than you do of being shot and killed with a rifle. I think we should just ban doctors at this point. Now, this one is really interesting. The Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994. It was signed into law by Bill Clinton and was written by our current president. One of the things he touts of being very, very proud of when it came for beating the NRA. Excuse me. Title 10, Subtitle A of the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994 imposed a 10-year ban on the manufacture, transfer, and possession of certain semi-automatic firearms designated as assault weapons. The ban is directed at semi-automatic firearms having features that appear useful in military and criminal applications, but unnecessary in shooting sports or self-defense. Examples include flash hiders, folding stocks, and threaded barrels for attaching silencers. All the things I talked about previously when it came to the appearance of the firearm. We in the gun community refer to it as the 1994 assault weapons ban. In 1994, Bill Clinton signed into law a ban on the manufacture, sale, transfer, and possession of AR-15 pattern rifles. And that lasted for 10 years, all the way up to 2004, as I said there. Now, there was a report done, because that 10-year ban was kind of an initial study as to whether or not it would have a serious effect on crime. And the Department of Justice reported that in 2004, assault weapons were used in only a small fraction of gun crimes prior to the ban, about 2%, according to most studies, and no more than 8%. Most of the assault weapons used in crime are assault pistols rather than assault rifles. Even though it's not an assault pistol, it's just a pistol. It's not an assault rifle either, it's just a rifle. There has not been a clear decline in the use of ARs, assault rifles. Though assessments are complicated by the rarity of crimes with these weapons and by substitution of post-ban rifles, they are very similar to banned AR models. Should it be renewed? In 2004, the Congress and the Department of Justice and a lot of other governmental agencies were debating on whether or not to further extend or renew the assault weapons ban. This is what they said. Should it be renewed? The ban's effect on gun violence are likely to be small at best, and perhaps too small for reliable measurement. AWs or assault weapons are rarely used in gun crimes even before the ban. The Department of Justice deemed that a further ban on assault weapons, assault rifles, AKs, ARs, etc., 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 would have no weight on crime. And nonetheless, reducing criminal use of assault weapons, and especially LCMs or large capacity magazines, could have non-trivial effects on gunshot victimizations. The Department of Justice said this. And lastly, a bonus myth is nobody wants to take away your guns. Well, hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47 too. That was Beto O'Rourke, a Democrat out of Texas during the 2019 presidential Democratic debates. And in 1995, Dianne Feinstein, the same woman that said it was legal to hunt humans, said, if I could have gotten 51 votes in the Senate of the United States for an outright ban, picking up every one of them, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in, I would have done it. And to prove I'm not sprouting crap, there's all my citations. And lastly, the Second Amendment, which I hold near and dear to my heart. I just want to say thank you for everyone that came and to anyone that's online. I also want to thank the university and the DiverseU panel for letting me talk. I greatly hope that everyone here may have learned something. So thank you. 10 minutes? Okay. I'm gonna have to try and find the chat here. Maybe. There is no chat online. Okay. If anybody has any questions, I will gladly answer them right now. So every year, the FBI and the CDC and a lot of other agencies gather up all the reports, especially when it comes to deaths and homicides. CDC mostly focuses on personal things comparative to the FBI, which focuses on crime. And they collect it through the UCR, the Uniform Crime Report. And they always post that online as well. And they also have all the years prior, well into, I know the 80s for sure. It probably goes way past that. I use the 2019 statistics because they're the most recent. So does that answer your question? Yeah, and it takes a long time to release that data. All the 2020 statistics should be releasing here within the next couple of months. I know that young lady in the back had a question. So, as I mentioned in there, assault is a physical attack. When it comes to assault weapons, it's more or less taking two words, and you really should put a comma in there, or a hyphen. Because as I said, a weapon is something that's either designed or not designed to be used in an attack, a physical attack. So if I came over to you and I punched you, which I'm not going to do, that's assault. And as the FBI said, hands, fists, and feet are considered weapons. Now, as far as the military is concerned, assault rifle is a real legitimate terminology. It was coined by the Germans in the 1940s. And an assault is an assault on a fortification. You're physically attacking something in the military. That's really what that definition is. Did that answer your question at all? I kind of jumped around a little. The basic crux is that assault weapon is a near impossible term to define because over 50 states and with a massive federal government with 400 and something senators and representatives, the laws are constantly changing and updating and moving around and trying to fight off any sort of updates that are happening within the firearms industry. Yes, sir. Boy, there's a ton of different places. I think really the biggest one should be mental health. I wholeheartedly agree on that. And yes, it takes something breaking within someone's mind to stand there and go, I'm going to go down to my school and I'm going to kill a lot of people. There's clearly a problem there. But when it comes to firearm related deaths, 70 to 75% of those are suicides. And as someone who went through a bout of depression and suicide as well, I can attest to this. It is a serious mental health problem in the United States of America that doesn't seem to get the recognition or the money or the funding or whatever that it really should get. So does that answer your question at all? You're welcome. Anybody else? So the gun control topic is a massive topic. We'd be here until midnight if I decided to talk about that. As far as self-defense is concerned, the CDC in the 1990s and in 2012, if I remember correctly, Obama did this. He did an executive order to have the CDC look at firearm-related crimes comparative to self-defenses. And the CDC determined that it was approximately 2.5 million defensive uses of firearms in the United States of America every year. And they also added the caveat that said that that number is probably a little bit higher given the fact that not everybody reports or calls the police after having an incident. So those incidents can revolve in defensive shootings. They can also be involved in simply brandishing the firearm. And brandishing means you're just showing it. It's kind of a sign of intimidation. So there's more defensive uses that save lives than there are that offensive uses and illegal uses that actually take lives. 5 minutes? Okay. Anybody else? No, it's solely private. Not with the CDC. They just did, the big 2.5 mil overall defensive uses. It's really hard to break that down because police reports don't always say that, oh yeah, an AR-15 was used here, a handgun was used here, a musket, which there's a video of a guy that actually tried to rob a store with a musket. They just generally put it down as rifle and then handgun when they report it to the UCR. A bit of both. I always want to hear what people have to say. And then the counterpoint is to try and educate people. And I personally believe the biggest way to educate people is to have them interact with the object in question. I do own an AR-15. I don't have a problem admitting that. I have gotten a lot of people that have never held one, that have even been scared by it, to get behind it and to shoot it. And they've had a lot of fun. You know, you can't really drive a car without getting in the car and learning how to drive it. Any other questions? Nope. Well, I'll finish with this. I am not here on behalf of the NRA. I'm not here on behalf of the gun owners of America. I'm just simply a guy that wanted to finally spark this conversation. And I'm really glad that a lot of you saw interest in that. And I hope you walk away at the very least thinking about the numbers and the statistics and everything I presented. It was a lot of information, but hopefully I opened your eyes just a little bit. Yes. Google. While the internet is a massive land of misinformation, as you said, and as the statement that used to be said within the last 20 years is, if it's on the internet, it's probably not true. But everything I used, minus a couple of sources, it was directly from the CDC. The FBI is an excellent option as well. YouTube can be a great resource. News companies, you can find things, books are kind of hard in this day and age. But the Mansfield Library has its database of sources that you can access. The biggest kicker really is I trusted those big government kind of organizations to get their points across, to get my point across actually. So there's just a ton of resources you can access. There is a bit of truth to that. Yeah, if you've got a lot of money to throw around, you can actually pay Google to be at the top of the search list, ironically enough. I'm out of time. Perfect.
Test now.
Across the board. I don't think we need big ovens. Pretty well. Yeah. Mhm.
Test, test. If someone online can hear, can you give a thumbs up, please? Oh, they can hear.
Perfect.
Okay,
So
yeah,
it's,
we'll get
it's from here. All right. Okay.
Hello, and thank you for taking part in 2021's DiverseU Build a Community. Before we begin, I would like to note that we are recording each DiverseU session so that we can make them accessible after the event is over. Please keep this in mind as you engage in this space, as your questions and comments will be included in the recording. DiverseU is a celebration of diversity. I'm sure we're all eager to find out what can be learned by attending these sessions, but first, a few ground rules. This important student-led program creates learning spaces where people from various disciplines can facilitate discussions in an engaging academic setting. DiverseU is an opportunity to engage in civil discourse and dialogue through listening and learning. The ground rules are in place to assist our presenters in maintaining dignity and respect in those spaces. So here are a few guidelines for participating in the discussion and how we can better serve and respect this learning experience for everyone involved. Guideline 1, communicate direct personal experience and not secondhand experiences. In doing so, we rely on I statements like, I was affected by an incident where, and I know in my own life I experienced. Guideline 2, speak for yourself, not as a representative of any group or any other person. Along the same idea, do not single anyone out to be an expert in order to speak on behalf of any group. If you do wish to reference studies outside your own experience, we invite you to cite academic studies collected from the various academic journals and databases available through the Mansfield Library. Be respectful and courteous throughout each presentation, whether you agree with the presenter or not. Our central mission here is civil discourse. Be mindful of the amount of space you are taking up and allow others to share in the dialogue. Be mindful that many of the presenters are in a place of vulnerability due to the personal nature of each topic. As an institute of higher learning, we depend on the student conduct code to ensure each presenter is treated with dignity and respect. Guideline 6. Active listening is more than hearing. It is expressed in our presence in the room. Based on this factor, we ask that while in the learning space, you silence your phone. If you do need to text or talk on the phone, we ask that you respectfully step outside of the meeting space to tend to those communications. So there you have it, friends. 6 relatively simple guidelines and expectations for conducts in these spaces. These rules apply to individuals and groups that are not students, and we will enforce them should poor conduct occur from any person. Thank you for coming. Now I will turn it over to our amazing presenter to begin.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this section. Let's tackle the global challenges. I'm Phyllis Lai, Director of the International Development Studies program here at IDS in short. This section is hosted by the IDS minor, the IDS club, and the IDS graduate certificate. And we have several co-presenters, co-facilitators here today. They are IDS students and IDS club members. So we have Kirsty, Jessica, and Ruby, Bella, and Caroline online. These are IDS minors. And we have Katie, Isabel, and McKenna. They're IDS members. Thank you, the visitors here, for attending this session, and thank you those online for joining us. I'm so happy to see you all here. Your presence in this section tells me that you care about the world. You care about contributing to solving global problems, and you care about serving the underserved, and you want to make a difference. The world continues to confront daunting challenges. COVID-19 has exacerbated nearly every global challenge facing the world. Let me briefly take about 5 minutes to kind of get us thinking about some of these huge challenges. Then I'll get you into small group. This is really not a lecture. It's a section for conversation. So I will try to have you in groups and start talking some of the global challenges you are passionate about, you are thinking about, global challenges that are dear to your heart. The the UN Sustainable Development Goals 2030 capture the key global challenges. I think you can see that slide. No, you cannot. Let's go to that slide. And can we move the slide, please? So I would like to show a list of those global challenges through using the UN Sustainable Goals page. Can you move the slide? Okay. While she's trying to show the visual, I can start talking a little bit more. One of the global challenges on top of the SDGs is poverty. As of 2021, almost 700 million people live in extreme poverty on less than $1.90 a day. Since the start of COVID, an additional 124 million people have been pushed back into extreme poverty. Another huge global challenge is hunger. As of 2020, 2.3 billion people are without food or unable to eat a healthy diet. Since the start of COVID, an additional 161 million are likely to experience hunger. And health disparity is another global challenge. Less than half of the global population is covered by essential health services as of 2020. Healthcare disruptions caused by the pandemic could reverse decades of improvements in child health, maternal health, and HIV, and etc. Education disparity. Over 200 million children will still be out of school in 2030 because of COVID. 90% of all students around the world are out of school, reversing years of progress in education.
Next slide.
Yeah. And thank you. Now we're seeing the list. This is just helpful visual to show most of the global challenges facing the world. We talk about poverty, hunger, health disparity, education disparity, gender inequality is another one. Women spend about 3 times as many hours in unpaid domestic and care work as men. Cases of domestic violence have increased by 30% since the onset of the pandemic. Climate change is a big one. Climate change continues to exacerbate the frequency and severity of natural disasters. 85% of the world population live in areas affected by climate change. Water and sanitation. 2 billion people still lack safely managed drinking water as of 2020. 3.6 billion people lack safely managed sanitation. 1 in 3 people worldwide lack basic hand washing facilities at home, the most effective way for COVID prevention. Disruption of ecosystem. 2 billion hectares of land on Earth are degraded, affecting about 3.2 billion people, driving species to extinction and intensifying climate change. Over 31,000 species are threatened with extinction. And there are a number of other global challenges on this page and beyond. So today I would like to invite you to go beyond just being aware of these issues, but to start talking about how each of us can contribute to solving these global problems. As I said before, I want to stop talking. This is not a lecture. It's for you to engage in conversation about global problems that bother you or the issue that dear to your heart. So just imagine the outcomes and the impact. If each of us in this section, each of us at each of us in Montana, and each of us in the United States, and each of us in the world will take a step towards solving a global problem today. So I would like you to invite each of you, before we leave this section, to make a commitment to take at least one SDS, small doable step, immediately after this section to contribute to solving a global problem. So let's get into small groups and start the conversation. So we have one group online. Caroline will be the facilitator. So get started, Caroline. And then we have, maybe we should have three groups here. Yeah, let's have 3 groups here in the room. So group of 3 to 4 each group. So I'll have Kelsey and Isabel.
Hello, everyone online. Can you hear me?
And you know, like,
Hello? Okay. Great. So my name is Caroline. I am a senior at UM, and I am a political science major with a minor in international development studies. Would everyone like to go around and introduce themselves to the group?
I'm Gigi Wykes. I'm a faculty member here in anthropology. I may have to step off because I have to teach, but I'll be on as long as I can.
That's okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the group that would like to introduce themselves? Okay, so I guess I'll get started with the first question. The first question is, which global challenge do you think of, which global challenge do each of you think of is the top priority requiring the most urgent actions, and why?
where's the text?
So our first question is,
No, just on.
I don't know if the other participants want to talk, but I would say gender equity and or equality. And the reason is that it is the fulcrum of so many of the basic needs, that if women have education and access to employment, some kind of income generating activity, they help their families. There's better health, better outcomes for their children. And so a lot of these global goals can be met so much easier. I've always felt that you have to find the one issue on which all the others hinge, and that is it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree that gender equality is probably one of the most main points for me as well. And I've also learned that if women have access to education, it also increases the country's GDP. So not only does it benefit her immediate social circle and her family, but it can also has the potential to benefit the entire economy of the nation as well. So yes, would anyone else like to share and a pressing problem that they think is a priority that is requiring urgent action? And I believe we just had someone else join the group. I think it was Cindy. Hi, my name is Caroline, and I'm facilitating this discussion today. And we're just on the first question, which is, which global challenge do you think is the top priority requiring the most urgent actions, and why? And we've highlighted gender equality as one of the most pressing actions.
Caroline, can you tell us a little bit more about your connection to IDS?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I'm a political science major, and I'm minoring in international development studies. I was a part of the original IDS club that was going to travel to Hong Kong in the spring. However, because of COVID, the trip was canceled. But we still am engaged on campus in a few different international development studies events like DiverseU. I'm currently studying in New York this semester through an exchange program, which is why I'm online right now. So that has been very interesting and given me a great new perspective on the world as well. But yeah, that's my involvement.
Where in New York?
I'm studying in Long Island right now at Stony Brook University. It's
Mm.
about an hour outside of the city.
There are some excellent professors in development studies there.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think another, I guess another priority I would say is pandemics. I think that we've all seen the effects of a pandemic, and I think that it, like Professor Nye said in her opening speech, pandemics tend to exacerbate the problems that are already affecting marginalized communities. And I think that a lot of countries were unprepared for the effects that the pandemic would have. Would anyone else like to share? Or does anyone disagree or agree?
A couple of years ago, there was someone who visited here from Tufts University about not just pandemics, but sort of the preparation that governments make globally for sort of the approach of FEMA, the disaster relief response for any kind of natural disaster, human or man-made disaster like a pandemic. And I was struck by the way in which it was proposed as utilitarian, sort of just preparing for disaster without any cultural comparatives perspective. So you would think that there would be the same preparations globally in every single country, when in fact that, you know, that varies enormously from culture to culture, how much people think about the future, how much they prepare for the future, and in what terms. And it's true that the pandemic has exacerbated inequality and poverty and all the factors that Phyllis mentioned, but there have also been unexpected opportunities that we have met because of the pandemic. Things have been accelerated, things have opened. And I'm curious what people think about that sort of process of, even if we were unprepared, some things have leapt into motion. And I'm just curious what people are experiencing now that they think might be a global experience that we didn't know we could do.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It definitely has, I think, had some positive aspects as well, and kind of shine light on a lot of things that our society needed to pay attention to, or in the US and also in other parts of the world. And then I think it was Leanna, you said that you would agree as well. Do you have anything to share on what Professor Wicks has said?
Sorry, I was eating my lunch. That's why I wasn't chiming in. But I didn't realize this was going to be an open topic forum. So I did agree that, you know, during a pandemic, it exacerbates issues that were already there. And so just like in homelessness, and, you know, the increase in homelessness or hunger or domestic violence, even because now these families are having to be at home. Something in our local areas, we actually have a decrease in youth court criminal cases, which means that the youth, although they might be out and about, they're not being referred to the criminal justice systems, or they're not being referred or, you know, by law enforcement, or they're not being, I don't know what you would call that, but basically because a lot of youth court is through the schools, right? And because the schools were shut down, they weren't able to report to law enforcement, and they weren't able to report some of these cases. So kids, although, you know, kids aren't going into the criminal justice system, which is okay, great, but the criminal justice systems a lot of the time also has programs for these youth to go into, you know, restorative youth justice and different community services and stuff that can help to change the kids and turn them around. But we've actually seen a 30% decrease in that, which means that the kids are they're just living at home with their parents, having to be that authoritarian. And it's just not, you know, the parents aren't getting the support, which is also leading to that domestic violence. But also, you know, these students, these kids are not getting the additional community resources that could possibly help them.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good point, and it's a very interesting statistic as well. I did not know that. But yeah, if a statistic goes down, it doesn't necessarily mean that those issues are going away. It probably means that people just don't have access to the services anymore. So it's not showing up as much.
Right, because the schools refer, you know, they have the student resource officers, which would refer, you know, if the kids are caught with a vape pen or there's some violence or something at the school, the officer will report them and write them up a charge, which then they have to deal with, you know, and they might get an MIP or something. And in this case, because they're not in school, doesn't mean that they're not vaping or using drugs or anything like that. They just don't have those resources to report them because the parents don't know what to do. The parents aren't going to report their kids. So
here's an interesting question of, that's kind of the micro local view of the opportunities and the unexpected changes. But what interests me is the changing notion of public institutions and public places where we all meet every day. And we have, as you said, resources, but also more regulations that aren't in the home, because the home is a private place. So we don't think of it as a place where school officers would be. But it is true that globally, these public places vary enormously. For us, schools are public places. But I think one thing that's shifting in the pandemic is people's perception of education as a public good. Because so many people have withdrawn their children from public school or begun homeschooling. And so much of the remote instruction was in the homes. So the whole meaning of public education as a place where there would be resources, where there'd be connections to court and social work and all of the different resources available, that depends on having schools as a public place. And if they're no longer that, if only half of the population, you know, say, is participating in that public good, and the rest of them are finding other channels of education or just educating at home, that has profound effects on all of us. And it's those kind of changes that I'm curious. They have some opportunities, but they also have some drawbacks. And because public education is not a long-standing tradition in America. It's a very novel, modern concept to have public schools. And it's one that we've exported around the globe. I mean, public schooling is pretty much post-World War II. So that's the kind of question I have when you look at the global goal of education. I mean, what do they mean by education? And where does it occur? Because that would be my second major goal after gender equality would be just education.
Mhm.
Except,
yeah.
except I know that what that field is becoming is so much more varied now than it was before the pandemic.
Yeah, if we look at, I like that idea on taking it on a global level too, even though we're taking our American-based education to other communities and building schools, but some of these other, and educating that way scholastically. But it's these hands-on approaches of these villages and other communities globally that have that hands-on approach that you kind of don't really get in the schools here. And with ADHD on the rise with our students, that inability to be able to sit still and them needing to move around, there needing to be more interactions and activities that way. Yeah, how our education system might be shifting a little bit and how we might be able to take more of a, I don't know, a different approach to our education system. And the fact that we're even like going into other global communities and teaching them our ways, but we might have something to learn from their ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even our past mid-century teachers. I remember talking to a retired teacher once, and she said that she used to have the students spend an enormous amount of time in the classroom, moving around the classroom. She would have them come to the board. She would have them walk back to their desk. She would have them go over, and she literally kept them moving the entire time they were learning to read, because she knew, and this was back in the 60s and 70s, before ADHD was even a thing. But she knew as a teacher, you had to keep children that age mobile, active, as they're doing tasks. And that broadens our whole notion of education. You talked about teenagers, possibly still doing things while they're at home and their parents wouldn't report them. But home is also changing what home is. And I think when Phyllis was giving all those statistics, the idea of sanitation, of clean water, of food scarcity and the insecurity, those are all focused on home for many of us. We think, do homes provide all those basic needs? But in a lot of societies, those are public needs.
Mhm.
So again, it's a question of where is the problem being addressed? Is it being addressed in private spheres, or is it changing our notion of the public?
Mhm. Yes, these are all very good points. I think I'd like to add that gender equality and public education can sometimes go hand in hand, and a push for more females education in the public sector could be a positive way to enforce that. But going back to the family sector, I mean, in different cultures, it might be difficult to improve gender equality through education. But as we kind of move outside of this, outside of the resources that public education may offer because of COVID-19, I mean, could that possibly have negative effects on gender equality hand in hand and this progress that we've made through public education?
When I think of the education system too, I think of that socioeconomic status.
Mhm.
And in our country, and then even globally, and the ability to be able to pay for some type of private schooling or extracurricular activities because of your social class and
Mhm.
where you stand in that socioeconomic status. So I would almost say another pressing issue for me is that rising, I don't think I'm going to say it right, in sociology, it's that rising social class disparity. Is that what that would be, that gap? Is that what
Yeah.
that's called?
Yes.
That's what it is. Well, and it's,
So is it the social, is it the social class gap, or is it the wage, the difference between, those in the lower socioeconomic status and higher?
well, the gap is at 90 and 10%, according to an article in The Atlantic, where there's a 10% of American society that they have reinvested their own wealth in their children, to try to keep their children in the class into which they were born. But inadvertently, they have provided all these barriers to the 90% of Americans who don't have as much wealth, to be able to prevent them from getting access to public resources, because they privatize everything. They privatize the after school, they privatize the school itself, so that 90% relied on public access. So instead of, you go to a public school, then you go to a public swimming pool for classes afterwards, you go to a public clubs afterwards, or a public park, that all of the things that would have enriched public education for all children, those also depend on everyone having free access to them, basically, that they're tax supported, rather than private resources investing in all those goods, because then people can't afford them. You can't, if your kids can't afford the fee to do something after school, then they're not able to take advantage of it. So that to me is and a town like Missoula, it's a really good example, because Missoula keeps trying to invest in public goods for all children K-12, and parks, and the parks and rec, just those kind of things that are open to everyone. And that model globally is very unusual. I mean, it's not part of a lot of cultural traditions to invest in public spaces. So that gap disparity is even more so in other cultures. But we experience it here, I think, with, not realizing that we could change the gap. We could mute it. We could make it less so. We could have things that are open to everyone.
Yes, and that leads into our kind of our last question. How do we solve this problem of this gap that is then again, made worse by the pandemic? And in many ways, when the pandemic hit, I worried about not every student had a laptop, not every student had access to a computer, not every student had a household where they could even focus on their classes while being online. And so that's another layer of this inequality that isn't maybe seen through money, but it's just the makeup of the household. So fixing this gap through public goods could be an option, but are there any other ideas that would play into it as well?
I would really just like to hear from families about all their different experiences. I think that we're experiencing a time of not listening and not talking to each other. And, the families that are gathering together because they're all homeschooling, and the families that are gathering because their kids are in public schools, it would be good to try to create spaces where people could talk and listen to each other across those differences, because then we wouldn't necessarily, we would find out what people need. I mean, it may be that everyone needs something and they don't realize that they all need the same thing, whether that's, I don't know whether it's technology or whether it's just sharing experiences to be able to find the common good. What the common good is, we don't often know what our common goods are across what might be real differences across people. But courts are a public good, and courts are a place that a lot of people don't know what they are, unless they experience them directly. They're just there. But you turn after a pandemic and now everyone's using Zoom for courts. I mean, court spaces are changing the same way school spaces are changing. So both of those institutions have a common interest in trying to use technology effectively to keep functioning. So that makes the common good really something like our local public television. I mean, our MCAT, but in a really broad sense, so that the courts and the schools and everyone else can use Zoom effectively. And that doesn't begin to address the differences at homes
Mhm.
and the disparity gap that Leanna was saying, but it does make us think differently about what are we going to invest our limited resources in that will make the maximum number of people's lives better.
Mhm. Yes, I agree. I think there's not enough spaces for people to share their experiences, especially enough spaces for people to come together with different backgrounds and share their experiences. And with being online, I mean, it's a positive and a negative because online platforms can reach more people. But at the same time, it can be harder to connect with others at the same time. But learning to use that in a way that could be a positive way to create change and create conversation, such as like the DiverseU like today, could be a really valuable opportunity for people to be heard as well. Would anyone else like in the group have any thoughts on fixing this problem or agree with the suggestions from Professor Wicks?
I agree. And on a community level, it's something that I'm working to put together for our community are these workshops and these community gatherings where people can come and their voice can be heard and they can learn and we can educate and inform each other.
Mm-hmm.
And with that though, in order to be able to sit down and you have the homeschool families and you have, I'm just using this example, and you have the private school families, and what I have seen is this really strong division of us against them. And so being able to bring these different groups together or the people together to be heard needs to also have a shared space of compassion and empathy. And I'm not sure if that's
Amen.
I'm not sure if that's something that's lacking right now, which it seems to me there is.
I know.
So there's this having this space for people to come and gather. Yes, if it's but so that it's not just us coming together.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a them coming together, but it's an us and them. It's an
Well,
us. It's all unified. And we share that space and compassion and empathy that we can hear each other and honor what that we might feel differently about things, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's a sense of this space to be able to let people just be heard and come and talk, but it's also a sense of unity.
Mm-hmm. Community too.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something in other cultures I've seen that people are very comfortable knowing that they're all coming from different teams. I mean, it's almost like a sports analogy. They're all coming from different teams for an enormous tournament, but no one team is vanquishing all the others. It's more that they're all just there to play. They're all there to run the race. They're all there to compete, to find the best ideas and to articulate them, express them, listen to them, consider them. And I saw that 10 years ago or 15 years ago when Missoula was planning to invest almost $150 million in upgrades across all the schools. They brought together people in this enormous process. It took 6 to 9 months of taking community input before they put together the bond. And then the bond passed, and then they spent all the money, and then they upgraded the schools. I was just so impressed with the kind of, what was lacking, I thought, was addressing all the people who aren't in public schools, of which Montana has significant populations of people that don't participate in public schools. And I felt like not having those part of to have that space to include them as well, what they need, because you just need a really big tent to solve a global problem. You need to include everybody as much as possible. And for education, I think that's one place where everybody has a common denominator. They want the best for their kids and grandkids and the neighbor kids.
Yes, I completely agree. I think that's a very good point. And a lot of times having compassion and empathy can unite a lot of people from different backgrounds and actually make people feel comfortable. So yeah, these are all really good thoughts. I think one thing that Professor and I wanted us to kind of talk about as well is what is something that we can do in our daily lives now that is like will help facilitate this in the future. I mean, creating this space is a big project, but what's something you can just do in your daily life to make a difference on the topic of kind of this public education and even gender equality?
Well, how about you, Caroline? You start us off. You're the youth. You give us the vision.
I think that, like you guys have mentioned, is having just empathy and compassion is very important, and it's lacking in a lot of areas of our society. And maybe just having compassion and empathy in just small interactions, like with your barista in the morning, or like seeing someone that you may think is different from you or has a completely different background from you, but still being compassionate to that person. So starting small, and just not reserving compassion and empathy for formal spaces, but also having it in just your daily interactions would be a big step.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. It's something I practice. It's something I had to really start to practice at the start of the pandemic because of so much fear and anger that was out there with decisions being made and just the politics that got involved and the people I was coming in contact with, so many of them on so many different sizes, levels, sides, everywhere. It was just so much fear-based. So in order for me to be able to show up for these people, I had to set aside my own, I don't know, opinions, beliefs, whatever it might be, to be able to just show up and share space with people to, if they are in fear, allow them to be in fear and not convince them otherwise, tell them that their feelings aren't real, argue with them or debate them, saying this is how I feel about the situation, and just really holding that space of compassion for people to be where they're at. If they're in fear, they're in fear. And
Sorry
and
for
I think
interrupting online. Yeah, thank you. We have about 4 minutes. I want to bring everyone together on Zoom and also here in person. I don't know, you see our audiences here in the theater. Doesn't look like they are using the camera, but we have about 10 people here on site. So I would like to use this last few minutes to invite the facilitators to share with the whole group some highlights of SDS, small doable steps that we can all think about and take with us, and hopefully actually take those steps when we step out of this section. So Karen, go ahead. I'll let you start there.
Okay, thank you. So we had a great discussion in my group. I think everyone highlighted some very important points. The two main problems that we chose to focus on are gender equality and then public education. Mainly with public education, we talked about kind of fixing this huge economic gap that is kind of preventing a lot of people from having resources. So possibly expanding public goods and resources for younger students. And then really, I think one major commonality of how to really address everyone's needs in a community, whether it be just Missoula or international, is creating space to have families or public servants or whoever it may be discuss their problems and how economic disparities or how the pandemic is affecting them personally and what they need to solve the issue, and validating their opinions. And to do that, we really need compassion and empathy in these discussions, and compassion and empathy for trying to understand someone who is different from you or has a different perspective from your own. And a small way to do this, just even today, is just to have compassion and empathy in your daily interactions with others, even if they are very different from you. And that hopefully carries over into a bigger effect later on. So thank you very much. It was a very interesting discussion.
Thank you, Caroline. Compassion. We can all do that, right? Yeah, can we make that commitment? Let's hear from the facilitator in the front. Each of them will share one SDS. Speak loudly. Katie, go ahead.
Our group talks a lot about getting involved in clubs and programs on campus to learn as much as we can about as university students, supporting local NGOs in New Zealand, soft landing or moving families for livable climate. And use those NGOs to volunteers, and it's something we
Bella.
we specific, but we got a commission of someone like we talked about hunger, and we talked about how Can the Cats is starting this week, and that's a good way to both take individual and collective action by donating something that you already have and likely will not use, and it's also a great way to show school spirit. So it's win-win on individual and collective action to participate in Can the Cats.
You were going to do that. Okay, that's not too hard. All right, McKenna, one SD.
I know this was more of Isabel's idea, but I guess in terms of like women's rights. So like she mentioned, Katie, taking localized grassroots actions to address women's rights, even on a local or international level. It's good to make those small steps, you know, starting out small and then working big later. So we can talk to agencies such as UN Women. But on a small doable step that we could take right now is definitely even just participating in local club actions such as the Women's Resource Center. I know that would be really good to focus on, and attend conferences that have to encompass issues such as reproductive rights. But yeah, those are just some of the ideas that we discussed. But yeah, I'm just. Yeah.
Volunteer or join an organization or donate to an organization, at least one. How many of you can commit to at least one? Right, yeah. Yeah, for women.
I think our group focused a lot about climate change and climate action, and we discussed how college students can really get involved here on campus through like the climate change studies minor and clubs and just talking with other college students. But I think something we can take away from today and work on in the future is creating dialogues with people who aren't in college, maybe like older generations, and kind of figuring out how to start that discussion on how climate change affects them, because they might not see it as much of a priority as we do. So kind of just figuring out how to motivate them to do something, like maybe join a club or just like talk to somebody else. So just kind of learning how to motivate other people.
Yeah, something else we talked about a little bit was sort of trying to be a responsible consumer, because a lot of the climate problems are based on big corporations and things like that. So we obviously personal steps in your daily life are important, but paying attention to where you're giving your support can also be important.
Yeah. So one of the actions that we kind of talked about was building connections and growing our network. And respects to the climate change problem that we talked about. Um, it's more than just relying on the information that comes your way, but it's more about going out of your way to find more or learn more about what's going on from the people that are in the field and are actively learning more about it and are studying that. And so I think that's a main part of just growing your network and also growing the knowledge and information that comes your way.
For all your contribution, ideas, and insights. Hopefully, that's increased our motivation to at least small step, starting our selves. So, thank you for coming today. And I hope to work with you, some of you, to do work with on some of these issues. Thank you, Kevin, and you learn some of the. Bye, everyone. Bye, Caroline. Thank you very much. Yeah, just that check in that and talking the size and the work. Yeah. Schedule. So please. At least you get the busy life. Keeps right. What's that? Yeah, I'll see you next Tuesday. And hopefully I can get this Jack stuff figured out. Yeah, it'll be great.
And then it goes in tomorrow. In the past, they have joining just by Zoom, and now I've got to go to town. Well, yeah, that's a review. But then I thought about that. Healthy age people. People that come to the Heart Institute have problems.